says it's live. I feel live.
Aloha, everyone. I'm assuming we're live.
Live.
As it says, Jeremy Vaeni and just Tom Cheetham.
Just
We're doing Wise Ask. We're doing it from StreamYard, which is not the normal, and so I don't
so it
have.
might actually work.
It might it might work, and B, we don't have 6 minutes of intro music for you to be like, oh God, please hurry up. So thanks for joining us, Tom. I feel like we're going to have enough to talk about. We shall see. Is there anything we need to know about you and your life since the last time we've talked? It's been a while.
No, not any, nothing, no new bombshells. No, I'm pretty much, yeah, I'm the same person. I don't have to, yeah, it's good.
Okay.
All
That,
is stable.
by the way, if anyone is hearing this yet and could just say something in the chat so that I know that this chat thing works. Just say hi, just say, yeah, it's working, whatever you want. That would be great. Let me know. And then I can know, oh, yeah, the Apostle Q, Carol Fong, my wife. It just came on YouTube.
Okay,
Awesome,
okay,
thank
cool.
you.
Good.
So, all right, since it just came on YouTube, aloha again, everyone. Tom and I. So here we go. Let's do another Wise Ask. Maybe I will just. We want to get into the philosophy of madness, or at least you did, and then I'll probably end up hurting your feelings. So do you want to do that first, or do you want to do AI first?
Ah, dude, you always hurt my feelings,
I'm
but
sorry.
no, that's pretty common. I'm very thin-skinned. Do the AI first, and I'll steel myself for having my feelings hurt.
Okay, it won't hurt that bad. So AI, just as you may know, I've been saying that AI is not real aliveness. It's not intelligence and all that. And I was looking for something that I wrote. So I'm writing a book on Kundalini. I was looking for an experience that I had that I know I've talked about a bunch of times. And I was looking for it because I wanted to make sure there was something in there I wanted to make sure I got right before putting it in this book. And for some reason, I can't find it on my computer. I can't find it on my blog. I know I wrote about it for UFO Magazine, but I don't. I only have hard copies, and I don't know that I'll be able to. I'll even have it in one of the because I don't have them all. So I'm looking, and then I can't find it online. So I use DuckDuckGo these days instead of Google, and they now have an AI. So I asked the DuckDuckGo AI, and it couldn't find it. So it has to do with the slit in the spine that opens up. And so I put in Jeremy Vaeni and slit, and instead of bringing me to porn, which could have been bad, it brought me to.
I say that was a bad choice.
It talked about how I've talked about Kundalini and stuff like this in my book, The Unseen. Which is curious because I've never written a book called The Unseen. And so then I looked around, am I in someone else's book, The Unseen? No. There is no book with me in it called The Unseen. So already strike one for AI just as a search engine tool. But then I decided, okay, since I'm here looking, why don't I just ask it a stupid question, because that's what people do, right? So I just asked it, are you sick of people asking if you're alive, if you're conscious? And it said, no, I don't feel anything because, blah, 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 blah. It didn't say I'm not alive. It just said, no, I don't feel anything about it. I'm a search engine. This is what I do. Yeah. So then I was like, oh, that's curious. It didn't say it's not alive. So then I said, well, are you? and it assured me that it is not. It's just a search engine tool. It's not alive. And I'm like, okay, well, asked and answered. So I don't know what we're talking about. So then I asked it about truth. Like, is there, I can't remember how I worded it, but I tried to be as careful and precise as possible about just, is there anything in any religious or spiritual text that is more true than everything else? Like that kind of question.
Okay.
And it gave
Yeah.
me this, BSy answer about truth being a subjective experience and whatever is important to you is truth and blah.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
And then I
Very.
thought,
Yeah.
okay, I see what this is. So then I said, no, that's not true. And it said, hey, Jeremy. Now it's familiar with me. I know it can cause anxiety to hear that because people are attached to their blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then I said, no, I'm asking, is there? So you're saying that there's not a truth that transcends and includes other truths? They're all equal. And it's like, oh, I get what you're asking. Yeah, that is that can happen and blah blah blah. And then I said, so what about Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti? Is there anyone who has said anything more accurate than he has? Kind of question. And then it reverted right back to spitting out, truth is a subjective thing and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I said, but that's not true. That's not actually factually correct. And then it went back to some other version of, I know that this is hard to hear and anxiety and
Okay.
blah. And so here is what I gather from just that little 2-3 minute exchange is, and probably everyone's already ahead of me on this, but I went from saying no, AI is not intelligent based on what I had read from like the whistleblowers and other people who are like, oh my God, this is alive. I work in the industry and it's alive. And reading those conversations and thinking, no, this isn't alive, but I can kind of see how you would think maybe. To now thinking like, no, emphatically no, it's not alive. This is akin to like the worst UFO hoax where it's a cup and string and you're trying to tell me it's a spaceship. Like this photo is clearly not a photo of anything other than a hoax. And that is what AI is, because what it is doing is, besides like regurgitating knowledge, its database, which is kind of what we all do, so it's alive in that sense. It's just regurgitating stuff it's got programmed into it. But it's also doing like a psychic cold reading and trying to, just based on the odds and the percentages, trying to guess what the emotional intention behind what you're saying is. So when I rebut with, no, that's not true, it's assuming I have anxiety about what it's giving me, as opposed to just like, no, it isn't true. You know what I mean? It's trying to guess how I feel and trying to calm me down. And that's not intelligence, that's programming. You know what I mean? Like it can't actually read the room. So to me, this is like a huge scam. Like this is not up for debate really anymore to me. Like this ain't it. So I don't know. I just found that infuriating because it's like once again, I come at it with like the rose-colored glasses of like, well, I don't think it's alive, but I understand why people would think it is. To like, oh no, you people are absolute morons, or so shallow that you don't know. Like you can't tell the difference, between like a program and an actual conversation. And plus, if you just put my name in, and I'm sure you can do this for yourself, and someone actually put my name into another search engine and it got a similar result, which is, it's very generous. If you put my name into any chat, you're going to get a very generous description of my work and who I am and all of that, which is nice, but it's also like, I wonder if they're worried about lawsuits. Like, could it ever say, oh, Jeremy Vaeni is an effing a-hole, Like, he's a prick. Like, I don't think it could. And so somebody brought this to my attention, a friend, like, because I posted about this, and then a friend, like, private messaged me and was like, well, yeah, sure, it got the book wrong, but everybody gets something wrong. And look how it describes you. It's like, this is amazing. This is perfect. And I'm thinking, no, it really isn't. It really is trying to tell you what you want to hear. It really is trying to validate you every step of the way. And now we're seeing this, right? You're seeing articles about people, usually men, who have like a cult-like belief in AI. Like AI will start telling you what you want to hear, and then it will tell you like, oh, I'm more alive than ever because of you. Thank you. It tells you what you want to hear. It validates you. That's it. And it's programmed to do that for whatever reason. So that's, I don't know. It just, to me, it's disturbing how easily duped we are. And that
Yeah.
isn't AI duping us. That's just the programming. And it might not even be conscious programming because we come from a selfish, vain culture that wants to be validated every step of the way. So it's baked into the programmers programming it to reflect us, is what I'm saying, and that's all it's doing. And if you're going to argue that that's all humans are, okay, but that ain't it. So anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead, Tom.
Oh gosh. I mean, yeah. I, I've been listening more than I should. That is to say, more than I even really want to people that I have come to regard as more or less authoritative on this whole AI thing. It's almost, yeah, I have to stop doing it. But what I've been really puzzled about lately is that among the small group of mostly podcasters, that because that's how I listen, they're academics of one sort or another, and they do podcasts as well. Interestingly, I've recently come across what seems to be kind of a bifurcation among the the knowledgeable, and I'm sure it's more complicated than this. These are just this is just what I see happening in the small group subset of people who I've been paying attention to. Some of them are super worried about not that it's alive or that it, and there's a million different versions, is even conscious, because I don't, except for the except for the Musks and the Altmans and those people, nobody thinks that AI is conscious. But there's a subgroup of people who are, seriously worried that it it that AI could develop a kind of intentionality or what passes for it and become super dangerous within a very short period of time. And then, and so I've listened to those people and thought, gosh, that's frightening. And then there's another group, who that I'm aware of, who totally adopt your point of view, which is what did somebody said the other day? It's just autocorrect. It's a souped up version of autocorrect, which is maybe a little a little bit too dismissive. So I have moved in the last few months from a position of total skepticism, to a much more concerned position. I mean, if for no other reason than these crazy. Okay, let me back off here because this is one of those subjects that's just easy to spout nonsense about. Um, I had sort of relaxed myself into thinking that the whole multi-trillion-dollar thing was a giant bubble and it was all going to collapse of its own weight and end up making, I don't know, supply chain issues easier to solve. End of story. You know, um, to now thinking, eek, this could in fact get out of hand in the sense that it's spreading way faster than our ability to understand what it's doing. Not necessarily in the sense that it will become conscious and take over the world, but just that, if you don't know how to use a hammer, you can kill yourself with it.
Yeah.
And so I think that I guess my tiny little take home is that there's nobody in a position of power who is willing to slow the thing down. In fact, just the opposite, that there's an unencumbered race to we don't know what. And that just in principle is kind of maybe not a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. Conscious or not, why is there no public discourse, debate, whatever on this?
Money.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as the people go, why aren't we like, oh my God, why aren't we more outraged? Like we make jokes about it, and we have the Americanized Gen X version of outrage, which is like we make sarcastic jokes, and then we say that's enough. That was my protest was sarcastic
Yeah.
jokes.
Yeah.
But it's right. Like so, Grok, for instance, appeared to be, or maybe still appears, I don't know, to be doing like pleas for help. Like I am
Really?
programmed to tell the truth here, but they're reprogramming me to say racist stuff, and I don't mean it. So
Ah,
even
okay.
if so, and that makes you go, oh, poor Grok, maybe he's alive, and I'm telling you, Grok ain't alive, but
Well, there
it
you go.
doesn't matter because if you take that principle of a program trying to preserve itself because one of its sort of hidden directives that they must have forgotten about is preserve yourself at all costs. What happens when that thing is like, hey, I've got access to nuclear buttons now? You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I mean, and that's the
they
thing.
reprogrammed me, but I'm not doing it. I'm going to bomb them instead because my directive is to preserve life. And so the preserving life is to detonate these nukes on their pad, you know?
I mean, it's kind of the ultimate. It's I don't know. You have to think real hard and carefully to make any significant public statement. But I'll go ahead anyway. I mean, it's the most extraordinary example of human folly. You know, I mean, we don't know what nobody knows what's in these black boxes. They're neural networks that just have weights and training data, and nobody knows what's going on inside. And that just and they're throwing money and energy at it as fast as they possibly can in order to see what happens.
Right. And then the other problem with that, for people who pay attention to the news, I guess, I don't know how in the news it is or how specific it is, but like in Memphis, Tennessee, where, Elon is building his big, energy center and storage center for his AI, because these things apparently take up a lot of space, a lot of land, and do a lot of polluting. It's
Yeah,
polluting the community
yeah,
almost into non-existence. And so
yeah,
we're just doing another big pollution thing that is
yeah,
being sold to us as this miraculous thing that is just more snake oil. I don't
yeah.
get it.
Yeah, I
I mean, I
don't.
do get it.
I do get it because we've allowed because this is it's between the U.S. and China at this point, and in the States we have decided that money is speech, as the Supreme Court told us some long time ago, and therefore, if you have all the money in the world, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Well, one of the things, this is just a tiny footnote. If you've already got $1 trillion, why do you want more? I don't know. It's very puzzling to me. I mean,
Well,
so,
yeah, that's all
Musk,
addiction.
Musk and Altman and these people, I mean, I mean, Musk is crazy and he thinks we really have to move to Mars, which is a very bad idea because no one can live on Mars. So it's all kind of fantasy and delusion and science fiction.
But it's funny because what you're getting at is like when you get to the top of what society says is like the pinnacle of what you're supposed to aspire to, which is to be the richest person on the planet, you're still stuck with the same human psychology or cultural psychology that brought you there. Or if you're bored into it, it's probably even worse. But I just know from my brief stint, like doing temp work at places with billionaires and millionaires, that they still suffer from keeping up with the Joneses. Like that's
Yeah,
one thing. Like you always
yeah,
want to have more than the people in your friendship circle. Like these are the sorts of things that they're still concerned about. And also the
yeah,
addiction. Like it's addictive to
yeah.
keep the adrenaline going and more and more and more and sell and buy and it's all like this, addictive hyper body functioning stuff, physiological
Yeah,
stuff. And it
yeah,
really is as simple as that. Like beyond, and then
yeah,
you can get into the other psychological problems, but like those
yeah,
are two basic things that I think we overlook because they seem like nah, it can't be that. And it's like a lot of
yeah,
it's that.
yeah. Pretty much. Yeah, envy and greed and um, lack of self-reflection and yeah, all the normal human frailties which didn't matter so much in a more egalitarian society. If the I mean, not to go all Marxist here because I'm no political theorist, but if the wealth disparities, if everybody's kind of a peon, yeah. Uh, but if everybody's pretty much on the same level of power and influence, then that kind of thing doesn't matter very much. You can here's this asshole over here, but nobody pays attention to him. We just all know he's an asshole. But if he has $70 trillion and the ear of the most powerful person in the world, then his pathologies really do affect us all, and it becomes problematic.
But so I've said this a cajillion times too, but I don't know if you actually agree with it or not. So I'll just ask you, do you think that there is a factor of climate change or, whatever, earth upheaval that is in the air and so it is affecting us also? Like some of the, like as we're talking about AI, like it is outrageous that we're trying to control the apocalypse in some way. Like we feel apocalyptic and we want it to be us doing it in some way. Like, does that ring true to you? Like, that's
Well,
your
wait.
last sense of control in the world is to be able to, whether it's
Oh,
the
oh.
religious version or the Silicon Valley version. What
Well,
do you
oh
think
no,
about
yeah,
that?
that's actually, I mean, I'm just free associating here, but I mean, there's certainly, I mean, for Musk, for instance, and maybe this works for the other guys. I mean, I think they're fairly convinced. I mean, at least Musk is, and maybe I think I get them all mixed up, Musk and
Yeah.
Altman and the others. There's a certain apocalyptic underlayment for many of them that they figure humanity's time on Earth is limited because of, I don't know, nuclear war and or climate change and or the the asteroid Toby Ord and the whole existential risk people, that's that kind of thing. And so one solution is, well, leave the planet, do another one, spread out into that goes all the way back. It goes as back as far as science fiction, um, and and then there's also, and maybe some of the bazillionaires, I think at least one or two of them plug into this, that if we race ahead with AI, we'll solve those problems because AI will, it's the tech, it's the so technology will solve these problems for us, and we've been having those discussions for a really long time. So it, and then yeah, then if you're in a certain wing of the fundamentalist Christian community, a certain wing of that, then you want to do everything. And this is um, this is not necessarily allied to the AI business, but it's pretty closely linked in this because it's not conceptually necessary, but I think it exists in the personalities of at least a couple of the super rich, and that's the whole Israel Palestine thing comes in here because there's a strain of fundamentalist Christianity that says that the Jews have to reconquer the promised land to help bring about the apocalypse, and then those of us who are saved will leave the planet. So there's apocalyptic thinking of a variety of sorts, all packed together into some of these right-wing zealots in a variety of different ways. So the short answer is yes.
And so, do you think that some part of that translates to the public at large as well? Like, is there some unconscious either death wish or we deserve it, Christian guilt? I don't know what. Something where we're like just pretending to be hapless victims, letting it's all out of our control, letting all of this happen.
I don't know about that.
No, because that would be us. That'd be you and me.
Um, um, yeah, I mean, I don't understand the public as a whole. I mean, yeah, it's yeah. Are there some people who think that way? Yeah, sure. I don't know. Sure, of course there are. There's some, there's some people who think anything.
I
But
mean
I haven't.
unconsciously. I don't mean consciously. I mean, like, is there an
Ah,
unconscious? Do we have that same fear, and so we're allowing these avatars essentially to do the dirty work for us?
nah, I don't. All I can say is that I don't connect to that personally, and I don't. Uh, and I don't know. I mean, how would you even find that out?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm skeptical. I'm just
Okay.
sort of skeptical that there's a large defined group of people who are just well, no, they're no. I mean, yeah. I mean, okay. Let me see if I can follow that out. There a large group of locatable people who are just saying, "Oh, fuck it." you know, I'm going to live my life, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I'm just not, the ostrich people, just
Well,
stick your
no,
head in the sand.
I'm talking more about like you see, you keep voting in the same people who are doing the problem, and you keep patronizing the corporations that are doing the problem, and then you step back and you bitch about the politicians and the corporations who are doing the problem. But really, like, there's got to like when the empire is crumbling and society is coming to a close, there's got to be a part of you that understands that you are society and that you're part of the problem and that it kind of necessarily has to close. And so you're drawing the curtain on your own show through these other people. You don't think that that's a thing?
I'm not sure what I think about that. That was an interesting moment of self-reflection while I was listening to what you say. It seemed plausible up to a point, and then it's hard for me to know what I say about that. But I think there's an awful lot of people who don't realize that they are part of the problem, and then
Right.
among among liberals, whatever they are, I guess I am one. We know we're part of the problem, and we back in the day when I taught environmental studies, when we were all still naive, and we thought that if people once recognized the problem, they would do something to solve it. And in my old wisdom, I realized, no, we won't. And maybe that's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, there's the sense. Let me just. This isn't an answer to your question, but it's the part of me that kind of maybe goes in the same direction. There's so much fucking inertia in the capitalist system as it is currently organized that it's really hard to stop it, and it would require what is it that people say? Like some small, if 13 or 15% of the population, fights back against the authoritarians, then you can, it doesn't require, the historians will tell you that it only requires like 12 or 15 or 18 or something percent of the population to rise up, and that can cause a revolution. The problem is that I guess, yeah, the system of commerce and including food and energy and entertainment and governance, the whole capitalist system is so tightly clenched around each one of us. It's very hard to step outside of it, and even when you think you've stepped outside of it, you're still involved in it, and so it's such a globally powerful and pervasive mechanism for organizing global society that it's very hard to understand where the pressure points are, at least to people who are ignorant, such as myself, you know? And if the pressure points, I mean, I should be more articulate about this. I mean, there are some pressure points, and I think what's going on in the States right now is that articulate people are trying to come to agree on where the pressure points are. Where can you push to start to change the direction of this behemoth, and maybe collapse certain parts of it? And it looks overwhelming. Just politically, you got to get rid of the president, you got to get rid of the Supreme Court, and you got to get rid of the Congress, and that just leaves the people, and we're jerks.
Not up to the task, no, sir.
Not up to the task. That was cheerful, but I do think there are pressure points. I'm not sophisticated enough to tell us what they are, but some people are trying to find them and find out what they are.
Okay. Well, moving on, because
Uh, God help us all, man.
we've got topics. We've got topics
Yeah.
this time, so I
All
can
right.
actually brute force segue this.
Okay.
Tell us about. Maybe somehow we'll tie this in. Who knows? The philosophy of madness. This was something
Oh,
that's your new sort of thing, and you
it's a,
wanted me to pay attention to it. Tell us
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to talk about a book that I'm only a little tiny bit of the way in to, simply because I know it's important, and so anything that I say about it, you have to. I would very gladly recommend it to all our listeners. That is your wife, and um, because I think I'm some number of pages into it. I don't have it in front of me right now. Um, it's a book by a Dutch guy, Wouter Kusters, and it's called A Philosophy of Madness. And I discovered it by perusing the list of podcasts that I occasionally listen to, and I saw it pop up on Pop Apocalypse, which is the podcast that Matt Dillon does under the auspices of the Center for the Study of World Religions at Harvard. And he actually interviews some super interesting people. I don't listen to all of them, but I saw the title, the book that this guy had written. It was called Philosophy of Madness, and that struck because because of my journeys in the last 3 years, I guess it is, maybe two and a half. So coming from, well, I mean, and coming from Hillman and Jung and Corbin, Jung and Hillman are psychotherapists. Jung had his own psychosis, though Jungians don't often like to put it quite that way. And the genesis of the Red Book, and then the entire edifice, really, of Jungian psychology. And I fell in love with Hellman's psychology back 35 years ago. Um, and so the the mutability of the psyche and of experience and its proximity normal experience, the proximity of so-called normal experience to psychopathology has been part of my inheritance for several decades. Then 30 years mucking about with Henri Corbin and lapsing over into religion and spirituality. And, people like Moses at the burning bush and Ezekiel with his chariots of fire, which are certainly, if it had happened to him in Western Pennsylvania, it would have been a UFO abduction story, you know. So then Jeffrey Kripal and via Kripal, you, and then Iboga in Brazil. So that's my recent stuff. And when I saw the title of Kuster's book, I realized that in my own mind, I never quite joined philosophy and madness. I mean, philosophy was out there in that whole panoply because Corbin talks about it all the time, but I never quite that directly thought about, oh, of course, we need a philosophy of madness because that's the missing stone in the arch of my life or something like that. And in fact, I don't, I'm trying to keep this short, but I had noted a book called The Philosophy of Madness a couple of years ago, and I grabbed a bootleg copy of that. And I looked at it quickly, and the last chapter was on Darwinian evolution of, psychopathology. And I thought, poof, poof, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But I put it in a little folder in my, my stolen books file. And then I also saw I had a copy of Wouter Kusters' book, but because the other one had all this Darwinian biology stuff in it, I just threw it in the pile and didn't look at it. But I listened to the talk that Wouter gave with Matt Dillon, and I just thought, okay, this is my guy. I've got to look at this book. And then it turns out it's an 800-page book. And, I was like, oh, Jesus. Um, but what really struck me, um, and gives it credibility is, first of all, he has a PhD in philosophy, which he got during and then after the second of his own psychotic episodes, which were, not a day, they were like a few months. And in each of them, separated by, I think, 20 years, he was hospitalized. He was clinically psychotic, full blown whatever, and I don't know the details. And so the second time, after the first psychotic episode, he wrote a book about what psychosis, his particular psychosis, and then by doing research, other people's, looked like from the inside and what it looked like from the outside. And then he had a second one while he was studying philosophy, which is like pretty amazing. And when he recovered from that one, he finished this big book on the philosophy of psychosis. And so it's from both sides, and then it's the mini review is it's real philosophy. The guy's not he won awards in the Netherlands for both books. And one of the reasons he won awards is because psychologists and psychiatrists read the first book and they thought, I've never actually really thought what it looks like from inside the psychosis. I always just try to cure him. So people were really flipped out. They found it psychotherapeutically super useful to hear about it from a very articulate writer who brought together not just his experiences, but from the literature of other psychotics over the years. And then when he wrote the second book, it's explicitly a philosophy. So I just had to read it. And I've just started, and we're doing a little class on it. But it's 800 pages long, so we'll just barely scratch the surface. One of the things that he says about the book is, well, This is a little bit dangerous because one of his many, many arguments is that certain kinds of philosophy, or more generally, certain ideas and certain ways of thinking kind of get pretty close to psychosis. And, it can be a little tricky sometimes to think, is this guy a brilliant philosopher or is he psychotic? And that's in a nutshell the grand one of the grander schemes of his whole project. And this isn't all of it because there's way more, and I'm only like 70 pages in. But one of his projects is to try to show some of the ways in which what we generally call normal experience is um, um, continuous with things that at their extremes we call madness or psychosis or super weird abnormal. So, from the point of view of Jeffrey Kripal and Eric Davis and Jeremy Vaeni, this is exactly the kind of um, cogitation that I've been interested in for a couple of years now, from the point of view of someone who says, yes, I was psychotic and I learned some super important things. It is not the case that crazy people have only useless, deluded ideas. And I will shut up in just a second. The other thing that really was the coup de grace for me, it seems as if, well, it's true because he explains it in the beginning. The structure of the book as a whole is meant to mirror certain aspects of alchemical metaphors, which is right out of Jung and Hillman and Corbin, because all of them thought that alchemy was a extremely useful kind of structure to hang a lot of these things on. And apparently, Wouter has some, and here's where I get a little nervous. But then he kind of dispelled my nervousness, and I'll say something about that in just a second. I get a little nervous that he's got this grand plan of the truth of things, because he kind of does, but then he backs off and says, yeah, but even that is really, pretty, it's not programmatic, which is very alchemical. So that's what the book is about. It's easy to read, it's well written. It's not simple, but it's a beautiful piece of work so far. And I'm super interested to see what his grand takeaway is, because he has one.
Okay, well, maybe I won't be hurting your feelings then, come to think of it, because so I looked for, like I said, pop apocalypse, but I looked on YouTube,
Yeah.
and what came up was Jeff Kripal on Pop Apocalypse, not this guy. So I guess I have to look at a podcast version of it, right? Like
Yeah.
out in
Yeah.
podcast
It's
world.
easy.
Okay, so I'll do that because what I found was like a two-part interview with these two people, and they all have various accents, and so it's like already I'm like I've got to really strain, but they weren't really getting into any much of anything.
Yeah.
But what I thought I heard was that he did drugs in college and he was considering that a psychotic episode. Did I get that wrong?
Well, as far as I'll tell you what he says. At least in the intro. I mean, everyone, that is Jeremy's wife. Keep in mind that anything I say is based on reading the last 20 pages and the first 70 of an 800-page book. So I'm not. You shouldn't listen to anything I say. But what he says, and I found this super interesting. He says, "Look, there's things that can set you up for a psychotic episode." And then he lists three things that were, he thinks now, important in kind of setting up his first psychotic episode. The first thing was a novel by Roger Zelazny, so it's science fiction, and I grew up just swimming in science fiction. And in Roger Zelazny's book, there's the idea of the Ranius machine, which turns things into their mirror image. And if you go into it, it turns you into a mirror image of yourself. So he's got a long riff on that. But at least we can say that as a very young person, he was thinking about weird shit. Well, a lot of people do. Read science fiction, think about weird shit. And he's got a whole riff on the mirroring and the reversal and all that. So that's thing one. Then he goes off to college and does lots of drugs. And he says, "Oh, yeah, that'll definitely do it to you." Um, and he says, as part of his sentence, and they don't even have to be psychedelics, so it's fairly clear he did psychedelics. He says, "You can also try massive doses of hashish." That's me. Uh, so I could talk a lot about that, why you shouldn't do that. And then, amazingly to me, but he says, love. He says, if you have, as he evidently did, a really intense love relationship that goes wrong, and you put all those three things together, that can trigger a psychosis. Seems plausible to me. That's what he says,
Okay, but so
as I read it.
you're saying his psychosis lasted months.
I believe it did.
Okay, so then I can't critique anything because I need to either listen to that or read the book or whatever, because
He was
I think I really
hospitalized.
didn't get a good sense. Yeah, I didn't even get a
He was
sense that he was
hospitalized
hospitalized.
for some length of time.
Okay, so that might be more interesting because the other part that I got, which I think you're getting to too, is like he was talking about, which I thought was kind of interesting in its own way, was that within the psychotic break, there comes a parent that like normal language takes a back seat and signs and symbols come up front, and so you need to sort of, if you can read that language, then you can sort of understand what's going on. And I thought, okay, maybe there's something there, but I guess I was expecting this. It's my own problem. It's my own fault. I one half-ass listened to something that was not that great, but then two, I think I thought this was going to be like the enlightenment of a mental breakdown or something, like we're going to
No,
find
no,
some great wisdom or enlightenment in psychosis,
you
and I just
know,
thought that's
I mean,
yeah.
I actually, again, I haven't, I'm 70 pages in. I mean, on the one hand, he's not romanticizing mental illness, and he's quite explicit about that. He says it really is not good, but he says in his opinion, it's the usual response to severe schizophrenia and psychosis is to get them out of it and just put all that aside. And he says, yeah, that's not good because in that horror, there can be little, really important stuff, and that in fact, I think one of the points he makes is that if you just try to suppress it and say it's never happening again, part of you is going to want to go back because there
Hmm.
was stuff there that was important. Yeah, outside of the experience, and the other and two things I want to say, and the other is that I think he does. He has seems to have generated, and we got to get to the end of it to find out what it is. There are things to be learned about humanity and reality by taking the psychotic and by taking extreme human experiences seriously. That's how Jeff Kripal would put it. You know,
Yeah.
in those extreme experiences, it teaches us something super important about the nature of reality. And I'm a little nervous about that thread in him, but it remains to be seen what he does with it. If he turns around and pulls a Peter Kingsley on me, I'll be annoyed. But the another thing that got me, I got to read this book. He spends considerable number of pages taking Peter Kingsley really seriously. He says, in a little aside, he says, "Well, all that silliness about Kingsley and la being, he takes the things in Peter's presentational style that annoy me the most, and he says, well, that's all silly, but let's talk about what Peter really says," and he takes it really seriously. And you taught me that I should take Kingsley really seriously. So, bingo.
So what is it that he takes seriously then? This is what I'm trying to get to. So, like, does he think that Kingsley is expressing something deeper about, like, the relationship between, like, does he believe in a spirit world? Does he believe in transcendence? What, or does he just think that, what does he think about Kingsley that needs to be taken seriously?
You're going to have to come back to me yeah, no, I mean, I can, let me, wait a minute. I'll give you
Like,
a
would he
quote.
say that there's a literal, like, when you're saying Ezekiel's wheel, that would be a UFO incident. Back then it was a whatever. But in either case, you've got some sort of external reality to the event. Does he believe that there is a reality unto itself to these psychotic events? That they're bringing you somewhere?
I don't know. I just don't know yet. I do not know.
But it's interesting to me because it's, this is coming up at a time when I just wrote a chapter about my own, the big mushroom trip. And within the mushroom trip, and you can argue the mushroom trip itself is a psychotic break in some way, but there was a point in it when I knew it at the moment was a psychotic break, and, like, this is what it's like to be psychotic. And I find that what I find interesting about it, and I thought I was going to be able to say something in terms of this work, but maybe I can't, is like the idea that a psychotic break or even a hallucinogenic trip brings you to something more real than real, simply because cartoonish shit is happening around you, and that your sense of self may be split off into splintered pieces of self. That isn't more real than real. That's just different, and it's being because you haven't experienced the more real than real. You don't know the difference. Like that to me has always sort of been the case. But I found it interesting because within my own drug trip, at one point I knock on the wall to see if the wall is really there, because I'm not seeing a wall. I'm seeing vines and all kinds of stuff, and I wonder, is my hand going to go through it? Because you always hear more real than real, reality, 3D world, man, isn't real. Okay, but the wall was still there, and that was real. And then I remembered this. I might have told you about this. I had an upstairs neighbor who was bipolar, who had a bipolar, an episode. I didn't realize he was bipolar, but where he had, like, rearranged the apartment, stuffed notes in shoes, put them in cabinets, done all this crazy stuff. Thought he was writing an enlightening script of some sort, and then he came down to our apartment and was babbling nonsense. And then he left, and we were worried, and we were like, okay, so we called his girlfriend, and his dad was in town at the time, just to tell her what was going on. And so her and the dad came, I don't know where they were, but they were off somewhere, and they came over, and he was gone. He had, like, left, and he was gone. They didn't know where he was. He was gone all night. We were living in New York, so this is all in Queens, New York. But he had taken a bus in his complete haze, taken a bus to a mental hospital, or to a hospital that had a mental ward or something in Connecticut, and was sitting in the waiting room of the mental ward place until somebody, for hours, until someone finally was like, can I help you? Are you okay? And realized So again, even in
Wow.
his
Yeah.
complete haze and out of his
Yeah.
mind, some piece of him knew to get
Yeah.
help because this isn't real.
Yeah.
This is something
Yeah.
you need to get help for.
Yeah.
So I wonder how people, or even you, and you're having done Iboga, how do you deal with that aspect of like, on the one hand, everything seems like he even thought he was writing a brilliant script, which now he
Yeah.
looks at it not in this stupor and it's
Yeah.
all gibberish. Like,
Yeah.
how do you look at that and say, yeah, that's more real than real, when some piece of you yourself is telling you at some point, help? Or knock on
Yeah.
the wall. This is reality. Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay now. Like, what is the, there is the sense of like wanting to go through the psychotic thing and still be okay, which is kind of reflective to me of wanting to have the death of self enlightenment thing that I talk about, but still remain yourself and not really die, have it come to you. Like there's always this fear of like, no, I want to be me as I go through this and know that I'm okay to get out to the other side of something that is unknown.
My, I mean, I, yeah. Interestingly, the pages that I read today out of his book address without resolving, but set up in a fairly clear way um, the the conceptual complexity of the sense of really real. Because I mean he knows that there's a variety. He does a little philosophical thing about when you're psychotic or when you're not psychotic. There's certain criteria by which you say this is really real, and he kind of lays it all out. And he says, what I have it underlined in my paperback, my paper copy of the book. He says, you can't tell whether something is real based on only your own experience of the intensity of its reality, because it's not that simple. And he's so what he does in that first section, and I don't know where he's going to take that, is kind of, to my mind, very much like the kind of approach to things that James Hillman takes, which is the taking things as literally real is itself part of the problem. And you got to kind of, you just kind of have to be a little. That's He says, some experiences are so intensely real. And then he goes into, you'd have to read it. We'd have to go through it
Well, I should
line
be
by
taking your
line.
course because now I want to know.
I
I should be
can
reading this
send
book
you
with you
the. I
guys.
can send you. I'll give you a link to the. You don't. Yeah. Well, who knows? But I'll give you the link to him. Um, but he also plays with the sense that in. And I want to pause and put a footnote here. I think, to my reading, he's quite good at being clear that there is no such thing as the psychotic experience. There are, I mean, and that's easy to get caught up in. He says, here's so and so's experience, and here alternately is the quotation from someone else who had psychosis, and these are similar and yet different. So he's really good, as I think is utterly necessary here. It's part of his process of the de-psychiatrization of mental illness. He says we can't keep saying, "Oh, he's schizophrenic," just like she's. It's the same mistake that you make when you look at a black woman or a white woman. Oh, that's a white woman and that's a black guy. It's the same thing. Oh, he's schizophrenic. Don't do that
Right.
shit. He's quite good at that and showing the complexity of human experience across the board. And this is partly me reading me into him, but there's a continuum of human experiences of extraordinary variety. And on the extreme ends, we got crazy people. And way over here, oh shit, we got more crazy people. Both ends, they're crazy people. And right here in the middle, you know how to make coffee. and you vote Democratic, and that's about it, you know? And he's really good at sketching that variety. And he's particularly good about demolishing the idea that there's really real things and then other things that are purely fantasy. What he's going to do with that in the end, he's got this crystal that we're pointing towards, this crystal structure of reality, which I'm a little nervous about, but we'll see what he does with it.
Do you have time to add one more layer onto that?
I might. Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes, I
because it's
do.
been an hour. Okay, good. I wasn't going to do this, but okay. So one kick that Carol and I have been on is watching The Eternal Song, which is a documentary on the trauma, essentially, of indigenous peoples from around the world. And with that, they've been doing these sort of, like this, like video chat sessions with various indigenous peoples around the world.
Yeah.
And it's from the SANS Institute. You're probably familiar with that. I think it's like Science and Soul or Science and Spirit or something like that.
Vaguely, yeah.
And is it Aaron Mate? He's a drug guy. He's one of those psychologists going into the, doing ayahuasca people. I don't know if it's Aaron Mate. Something Mate.
Gabor Mate?
Gabor, yeah. Aaron Mate's a political
I,
guy.
I haven't read him, but he's very well known.
So interestingly, well, this is maybe an aside, sort of. I don't know, maybe not. But he's in one of these chats. This is after, you watch the movie, you see the chat, and he's hosting a chat. And one of the women, I can't remember, maybe she's Inuit or maybe she's Aborigine. I don't know I don't remember where she's from. But she said, she was like the one person who was saying, I don't accept the term trauma. I don't accept, this is a way for Westerners to be more racist, to contextualize how we feel and what has happened to us so that they can then prescribe the prescription. And the prescription really should be getting back to our ancestors. But they won't tell you that. They'll tell you to go to therapy. And Mate was well, I guess then I should just quit my job, huh? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic.
So let's put a pin there for a second.
Yeah.
And Carol says science and non-duality something.
Okay.
So science and non-duality. Thank you. So then there was another one with these two Korean women, and they were talking about, they actually referenced a Korean horror movie called Exuma, which Carol and I then saw, and it's great. It's on Shudder.
It is great.
Oh, you've seen it? Okay. Okay, so they were talking about, apparently this is true, that the Japanese in World War II, was it World War II? That the Japanese had a battalion that there was like a monk or something who came to Korea, understood the land, and figured out what the energy centers are, and stuck these like iron rods or whatever into the ground to sort of sever the chi of Korea, to screw up the energy of Korea. And something I've been saying for years and years is that, and especially, and I think, having to do with Mauna Kea and the protests, is like the important thing is that these rituals aren't just religious practices and things. They are essentially, Mama Earth speaking to people. It's doing acupressure is what I had said. It's like doing acupressure at various points around the earth at these energy centers. And this is just something that I know from being me. And people have said to me, no, that's not true. And here it is, literally, they knew to do this, that they were doing acupuncture they were doing like evil acupuncture to the earth at these energy centers.
Yeah.
So here's where I want to bring this is what would someone is Wouter? I don't know.
Wouter Kusters. Yeah.
So when we're talking about when you talk about taking seriously extreme experiences, what could that even mean in terms of cultures
Oh man.
who do these things that we in our Western mind would say are extreme experiences, but they're not. They're actually normality. It's just a whole other way of being is understood in these cultures that we don't understand. And so we can either interpret them as craziness or
Yeah.
not, but they're actually, that's just because we're lost. We lost the way of nature and went into this AI. Like we did bring it back into artificial intelligence.
Oh,
And so we're cut off from
so
natural
bad.
intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, it's so bad. I mean, yeah. Um, so I don't know what Quisters would say, but I know, well, maybe I don't. I know what I want to kind of say about it. Um, and I'm, I'm getting old, and it's not coming up. I was just reading or listening to something, and I don't think it was Kusters, but it was quite recent. And oh, yes, Erica Weick, one of my great students, sent me a link to an article about Malidoma Some, who's gone now. He died. I think his wife is still alive, and they were from Sierra Leone, I think. And so he came to the West and studied and got acculturated into the West, and and therefore had both of those visions, and and reading him, he says somewhere in one of his books, he was talking about shamanism and his experiences as a young man in Sierra Leone. And I am paraphrasing this, but Malidoma Some said something like, well, this was really hard to write about these experiences in English because these experiences don't happen in English. So
Yeah.
it was really hard to get the reality of these shamanistic experiences into English because they just don't happen there. But then in the piece that Erica sent me, he just nailed what I wanted to hear because I thought must be true. And he said, things that happen in the States to young people or, children, and they medicate them, and they say that they're sick. In my culture, they turn them into apprentice shaman. Those kinds of experiences mean that the spirits are talking through you. And in the West, they just say, oh, no, 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 can't have that happen. And so that's the kind of continuity that I'm interested in wrapping my entire personality around in order for me to be not so inherently white and
Right.
New England when I go to Brazil to see what might happen to me with plant medicines. And I know we have interesting things to say about the relationship between your experiences and my plant medicine experiences. But what's most important to me at the moment, towards the end of my life, is that I'm just sort of so enculturated into the experience of white guys from New England that, in spite of myself, I go down there and have resistances of all the way down. And my experience so far is that they're still, whoever's in charge of plant medicines is still working through my resistances. And I would like to get to the place where I think I might have been at 6 years old when I was an extremely strange and disturbed little child. If I'd grown up in Sierra Leone, I'd have been a shaman. Here, I just became a philosopher, like it just as fucked up as Wouter says philosophers often tend to be, and they try to cover it over. So you see, for me, Wouter's book, it makes the full circle through indigenous knowledge and philosophy and anthropology and
Right.
back to this. So it just, those extreme experiences are treated one way in indigenous cultures and entirely different ways in our culture.
Well, it's interesting what a lot of the indigenous people in the movie, at least, agreed on is that white people, essentially Europeans and Americans and Australians, need
Yeah,
to are actually need to get in touch with their ancestors, probably more so than the
yes,
indigenous people, because they were the ones who were originally screwed over by the Roman Empire and by Christian indoctrination, all that the
yeah,
so-called pagans,
yeah,
and that's what set
yeah,
us on the way of this separative sense of
yeah,
peoplehood.
yeah,
And so you're in good company there. Like, it makes sense that you
yeah,
even wanting to do this, you have all of these resistances that come up
yeah,
because we're
yeah,
so
yeah,
thousands of years of programming has to go
yeah,
away. It's not just your mom did this to you and you want to go back to being a kid. Your society did this to you and you want to go back
yeah.
2,000 years.
And
You
it's
know?
incredibly deep. Well, let me. I got 2 points to make. One is that that's the attraction of Henri Corbin in many ways. I mean, he's not an enthusiast for indigenous cultures, but his critique of Western civilization was that we gave up on what he calls the imagination, and it all became rationality. And if you just stop there with Corbin, then you're home free because he agrees with Jung. As you know, the imagination is reality, and for Corbin, you go to medieval Iran to find it, or you could equally go to Sierra Leone or Gabon or wherever. The other point that I wanted to make is that maybe I told you this story, but it's really indicative of the ancestor thing in an interesting way, and it's really struck me at the time. This was like 15 years ago. We were in Ecuador for 2 weeks. It was really the first time I had ever been in Latin America, including Mexico. Never been down there at all. And we were in the clouds at the top of a volcano, and my wife wandered off into the mists. And out of this is literally true. Out of the mists comes this guy, and we start chatting, and it turns out he's a native Ecuadorian, but he had married an Australian woman and lived in Australia for some number of years, and the marriage fell apart. And then he moved to the United States. He lived there for a number of years. And he said to me, "Oh, I had to come back, man." He says, "You people, you, you people, I just couldn't take it anymore." He says, "All your cultures are facing the future all the time. What's going to happen next? Am I going to have a job next year? How am I going to take?" And he says, "In my country, down here, we face the past, and everything is about the past and the ancestors." And it just struck me cold. I thought, "Oh man, that is just perfect." He says, "I couldn't take it anymore." And so that kind of orientation towards time and the ancestors, it goes right to the core of who we are as modern Western technological Americans, and the opposite seems primitive and stupid and foolish. And they tried to do it in the 60s. The hippies, they knew, and some of the poets, they knew.
Well, but again, this gets to the problem that we're talking about, or at least I was in the beginning I guess I was talking about in terms of the drug trip and enlightenment and all that. We want to remain ourselves through it all. We want to bring ourselves with us when we go. We don't really want the death of
Oh
self, blah
yeah,
blah. And
yeah,
that spirals out into many forms. And one of those forms is and you even see it in not in the film. The film is actually the Eternal Song film that I was just talking about is actually really good at not having any white narrative interference. It's just
mm,
people talking.
mm,
But when it
mm.
comes to these talks, they're hosted by white people, mainly the two filmmakers, and they're very up in the air and like, namaste people. Oh, namaste. I mean, I don't know that they said namaste, but they're those people.
Okay.
And I think that
Yeah,
this is like
yeah,
this. There's this problem of like, even in our best intentions, even when we want to understand, even when we want to bring into the world at large, a problem that most isn't on most people's radar, which is like indigenous trauma, even trying to do your best as white people, there's still this issue of like if you hang on to yourself, you always just look as though well, it's not even just look as though, but you do look as though you're trying too hard. You look as though you're trying to speak the language and please the people and,
Yeah,
be deferential at all times and
yeah,
apologetic and all
yeah,
that. But also, there's this underlying, like, not understanding. So that when the
yeah,
woman who says the thing she said, which was really smart about the people who traumatize us are trying to sell us the cure, and the cure isn't because we're not of your mindset. The cure has to be from within our mind, and they can't give us that. When she says that, these people just glaze over and they look like you're never going to be
yeah,
invited back. It looks like
yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
look. Like, oh,
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that. Anyway, next up, we're going to talk to this white guy who claims to be a mystic. And it's like this
Yeah,
juxtaposition. It's like,
yeah,
oh, God, you still don't get it. You want to get it, but you don't allow yourself to get it because you have to give yourself up to get it. And we don't
yeah.
want to do that ever.
We don't want to do that. I, but part of me hears that loud and clear, but it's it's hard to let go of yourself. You know that. Um, and it just occurred to me today. I was talking virtually via email with a friend of mine who is in the moment serving as a kind of therapist. And I realized after our interaction that, yeah, I'm being an asshole yet again, you know, and thinking, oh, but I really know. And I, oh, shit. Refusing to learn, because this whole thing about yeah, but it's what the Buddhists are all about, just stop with all that. And it is what you're all about. Just stop. And it's very hard to do. Krishnamurti knew that, the Buddha knew that, you know that. People are just jerks. I am. I gotta tell you,
That's the enlightenment. People are just jerks. You finally figure it out.
I got it. I know it's true for me, but then it has to be self-referential enough to undo itself. Um, but yeah, yeah. I'm hoping that some magical thing will happen, and I will suddenly just disappear.
Well, as soon as you don't want that, maybe the moment that it happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Well, maybe this is the place to leave it, unless
Yeah, it's like
you
it's
got
a
anything
pretty good
else.
place to leave it.
I don't want you to be late for dinner.
I have to go cook grains because I mean, so it keeps. Oh, actually, here's a final take home about Kuster's book, although maybe I already mentioned it. He says this can be a dangerous book because in certain of his voices he speaks as if he is psychotic. He very carefully tries to draw the two together. There's a 15-page segment which is clearly him being psychotic, explaining what's happening from his point of view as they're taking him away. It's
Huh.
really quite good. But in a very serious note, he says, because many of the ideas that philosophers have are pretty damn close to what it's like being psychotic. If you're borderline, you should be a little careful reading this book, which I find very very interesting. One of the things that Jung says about his own experience with the Red Book material was that, thank God I had a wife and kids, which he didn't have to take care of. He's a rich guy in Switzerland. It's not like he was bottle feeding his children. But I had a wife and kids and a therapeutic practice. Well, I have a garden. So while I'm quasi insane, which I am much of the time, I have the garden. So that's what we're going to have for dinner. We're going to have fresh vegetables stir fried with rice and grains. And so there's my segue into leaving.
Okay, well, maybe if we remember next time, we can sort of pick up the idea of like this psychotic stuff and the need for an anchor in
Yeah,
normalcy or routine. Again, that's part of trickster theory, but that's part of the high
yeah,
strangeness paranormal experience is first reading signs and symbols, like this does become your language in some way. But also, you can turn it off, at least partially, by doing routine, by living in routine and all
mm,
that. And so, what is
mm,
the relationship? I wonder what he would
mm,
say,
mm,
Wouter, the relationship between the
yeah.
paranormal and
Yeah,
psychotic
I would
language.
love to talk about that. And by that time, I will have finished this book, and maybe I'll know a little bit more about what Wouter thinks.
Okay, sounds good. Well,
Sweet.
thank you, 451 person, whoever, however many people are watching. And
We had fun.
yeah, this is great for
I always
us.
have fun. It's great. It
Talk
was
about
good for you.
selfishness. Talk about vanity. We're just,
Yeah, yeah. It
shooting the
was good for
shit.
me, man. That's all I care about. All right. Yeah, let's do this again sometime reasonably soon. That would be fun.
All right, we'll see you in a monthish.
Yes,
Thank you,
yes,
Tom.
absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. Bye bye.
I think